I'm a little upset right now, and I don't usually make videos like this, but I think it's important this time, and I'm going to be invoking the hashtag free melee, and talking about why I think Nintendo is really overreaching in their practice of canceling the Big House tournament for Smash Bros. Melee, and maybe even some of the implications that could carry with the decisions that they're doing. Now, sometimes Nintendo screws up pretty big, and I sincerely think that this is one of those times. Well, Nintendo is fully within the rights to do what they're doing. That, I think, is a bigger discussion on free use and use of intellectual properties, etc., which maybe we're not going to talk about necessarily on a dedicated video game channel. I think this is an instance of Nintendo starting to revert to its former self, and in this case, a bad way. And yeah, I'm talking about when you couldn't put Nintendo footage on a YouTube video, you would get instantly demonetized. Nintendo would just suck all that money up in their own claims, saying that, well, it's our video game, so it doesn't matter what content you make about it. You're using our footage, that's our money. And then they suck it all up. I love Melee and Smash Brothers in general. The community is in a vulnerable state with the virus, and Nintendo could be doing irreparable damage to a 20-year-old dedicated community. Before we get into all the drama, I guess, please consider subscribing. We're doing a giveaway for Cyberpunk 2077, and we got Cyberpunk content coming really soon. Actually, I was gonna make the Cyberpunk content and before this happened, so here we are making this instead. We're like 100 subs away from giving away that game, so really please consider subbing and sharing. Throw this a like and comment down below. We want to make this video spread as much as all the other free Melee videos are spreading. And I'm going to be linking in the description below, if you're new to Melee, some cool Melee stuff, including how to get Slippi on your computer, and checking out some tournaments that have been played with Slippi. What is Slippi? Well, let me give you a little bit of history. Playing video games online is great, but at the same time it also sucks, because, well, there's inherent lag, there's latency. Games are not as fluid online as they are playing locally at a LAN party, for example. Now, there is a very good form of online play called rollback. Rollback online play is particularly very good for fighting games. It is extremely good at mitigating the latency, where even a 16 millisecond difference can be felt and noticed by professional players. Now, this type of online play is not generally in Nintendo games. I'm looking at you, Smash Bros. Ultimate. However, someone took 6 months of their life. They quit their job to develop rollback for Melee. And that rollback for Melee is called Slippi. So from now on, when I say Slippi, I'm talking about Melee being played silky smooth online. So the community was able to thrive regardless of the global situation. The wheels have been turning on this since even before the virus necessarily. This was going to make a game which has been played competitively, exclusively locally, as in with people sitting next to each other, sitting on a couch for decades, and now give it online legs for years to come. This would allow people who live on opposite sides of the world to practice together. This would allow people who have a small local scene to get good with experts all over the country and the world. And Melee has been doing in-person tournaments for literally 2 decades now before Slippi. However, obviously, we are now in a Slippi era. There's no traveling. That would be dumb. There's no in-person events. That would be dumb and irresponsible. So, Big House, one of the biggest tournaments in the Melee scene. This is an annually recurring tournament. Has been canceled. And why was it canceled? Well, Nintendo slapped a big old cease and desist on Big House, specifically citing the use of Slippi and how they should not be doing that and how that is not okay. So, Big House is canceled for both Melee and Ultimate. My guess is that Ultimate has been canceled to help spread awareness for the shafting of Nintendo on the Melee scene. So what do I have to say to you, Nintendo? First of all, this is a pandemic, and you're basically encouraging unsafe practices. Nintendo's saying, if you want to have your Big House tournament, then you can't use Slippi. which means you gotta do it in person, which means you've got to fly thousands of people into a massive venue to organize, congregate, sit next to each other, sit at the length of a GameCube wire, which I'm pretty sure isn't 6 feet. Maybe we could get those little GameCube extenders, but sit next to each other, share rooms and hotels with each other. Usually people like bunk together, people travel together. This is literally the worst way to spread the virus. You have people flying into one central venue from all over the world, then sharing all their germs and then sending them all back to where they came from. That's horrible, irresponsible thing for Nintendo to do when, yeah, they could just let the tournament happen with Slippi. Not a good look. Now, next thing I want to say to Nintendo, this is not a game that is currently being monetized. There is no, and I mean zero, alternative from Nintendo which they are making money with on Melee. There is no Melee on the Nintendo Switch. All Melee is being sold currently as used copies. There are no new copies being sold through retailers where Nintendo makes a cut, nor are there any digital copies to buy from Nintendo directly. Nintendo is not currently making any money from Melee. This isn't a situation where Nintendo has Melee on the Switch, but it doesn't run as well, so people are now using this Slippi situation. No, this is like the only way to play Melee right now. That's it. Last thing I'll say is emulation is actually free in the US, if you didn't know that. As long as you can prove that you have a physical copy of the game, then you're free to emulate it. You're free to responsibly rip that game and emulate it. Save it as a backup, essentially, in case your physical copy were to fail. Now, if you have a copy of the game, like I said, you can legally emulate it. Slippi is not actually a mod to Melee itself. It's a mod to the emulator. So if people can prove they have a copy of the game, there really isn't anything wrong with using Slippi. And I don't even think Nintendo would have any way of preventing that, except for doing what they're doing and saying you're using our intellectual property, yada, yada, yada. So the one devil's advocate that I could say in arguing in Nintendo's side is technically Nintendo can cease and desist the use of their intellectual property for generating profit. Essentially, I think Nintendo, as long as the big house is making money, which they would need to do because that's how you get Big House 2021, is so Big House 2020 makes enough money to stay afloat. If Big House was running their tournament at $0, free entry, free casting, no ads on Twitch, all of that, I think they could technically run this tournament. However, Nintendo is stepping in on this one. And this has actually been done before, to the point where Nintendo has actually shut down EVO from using Melee. EVO being the biggest fighting tournament of the year every year. And in addition, Nintendo has, like I said earlier, also been very, very, very notorious in the past for stepping in and essentially making sure people cannot profit from using their gameplay footage. Even if the footage is captured by the individual on a capture device, if you're using Nintendo's footage in a game, Nintendo will claim that as their own. And this was in the past, basically since the Switch era, that has been reverted. However, this to me looks like a step back in that direction. Now, ultimately, there is huge room for potential here. This has been made legit in the past. Other fighting communities that wanted their game to get rollback, that had community projects to make that happen, the owners of that intellectual property has actually hired members of that community to make it happen. This has been done before. I don't see Nintendo doing it. Like I said, there's room for potential. And Nintendo could monetize this and make tons of money. You bet your ass if we got rollback Melee on the Switch, I would be all over it personally. I'm sure a ton of people would, including professional Melee players, because then they could be doing things legit. Point is, Nintendo, I think, is overstepping and basically holding a community hostage from remaining viable and competitive through these times where we're under lockdown and can't do in-person events. I think they're overstretching a bit. I think there's no harm in holding this tournament, and I think Nintendo really has no claim to say that money is being thieved from them. So, with all that being said, I'm gonna invoke my hashtag free melee, and I hope you all consider doing so too. And if you're new to Melee, definitely check out some of the stuff I put below. I think it's pretty fun to watch. That's all from me. I will catch you next time.